2.4 Market equilibrium and aggregate demand shocks. Let us put everything together graphically. The aggregate demand, short-run aggregate supply, and the long-run aggregate supply. P on the vertical axis, GDP on the horizontal axis. Aggregate demand. Remember, consumption, investments, government expenditure, net exports. Any one of these would change, would shift the aggregate demand. Short-run aggregate supply. Any changes in input prices, for example, wages, the price of crude oil, and other inputs will shift the aggregate supply. And let us suppose to begin with, the short-run equilibrium is exactly equal to the long-run equilibrium. So let us put in the long-run aggregate supply in here. So my short-run GDP Y0 is equal to the potential GDP. The price level, let's call this P0. We can think of this as the consumer price index or GDP deflator in the base year. Point A is my benchmark, and point A is my short-run equilibrium, and also my long-run equilibrium. This is our starting point. Let us look at an aggregate demand shock in the short run and see how it would adjust in the long run. To begin with, the economy right now is in the short run and long run equilibrium. So let's draw this in. Price level, GDP, aggregate demand, initial, aggregate supply, initial, long run aggregate supply, Y0 equal to my YP, and P0, base year consumer price index, and let's call this point A. Now suppose the government increases spending on healthcare. G is part of aggregate demand. As a result, the aggregate demand will shift from the currently AD0 to something higher. Let's call this AD1. And point B. Right away we can tell the price level will increase from the current P0 to P1. This is inflationary. The short-run actual GDP will go from A to B, or Y0 to Y1, which means the actual Y increases from Y0 to Y1. What is the output gap? Defined as the new GDP, which is Y1, minus the potential GDP, which is YP. New minus old divided by the old, times 100, just to give us the percentage. This, as we can see graphically, will be positive, and therefore this is an inflationary gap. How is it possible that in the short run we produce more than what we normally could, which is the potential GDP? This must mean the actual unemployment associated with Y1 compared to the natural rate, it would have to be lower. Which means, how is it possible that we produce more compared to what we normally produce? Because more people are working. What are some of the costs and benefits of this government policy? The benefits: we now produce more, hence we have an economic boom, and we also create jobs because the unemployment rate will be dropping. What will be the costs? whatever that we buy would now become more expensive. How come? Because people have more jobs, more income, they buy more. When they buy more, they drive up the price. As we see, inflation would tend to climb up. How do we go from the short-run equilibrium, moving from A to B, eventually back to the long run? Remember, at point B, we have an economic boom. Unemployment is dropping. Because of this economic boom, most people have jobs, and firms sooner or later will find it really hard to find workers. How can they get workers to work? Wages will start to rise. And when wages start to rise, this will increase the production cost for firms. With the increase in production costs, what would happen to the aggregate supply curve? A at 0 will start to shift, and towards the end, it will go to, let's call this A as 2, point C. We get a new price level. Let's call this P0. What do we see? The first increase in the general price level was because of the demand side becoming stronger. And with this higher demand, making jobs much easier to find, workers in short in supply, eventually, firms need to get workers to work, more workers to work. That would also increase the wage. This second increase is because of the wage. The first increase is because of the demand side. So towards the end, what do we see? We go from A to B and then to C. This implies that the initial increase in government expenditure managed to create a short-term economic boom, but the boom or the overheated economy will drive up production costs, and then towards the end, the G increase will have no effect on GDP whatsoever, and all this would do is increase the price level towards the end. Does this make any sense? Remember, potential GDP reflects the productivity of Canada. How many workers we have, what is our labor force, what kind of technology we have, what kind of capital stock we have. Increase in government expenditure is something artificial. It has to be paid for somehow. If you borrow now, you pay for it in the future, or if you increase taxes to pay for this. Eventually, what this would do is there is no effect on potential GDP whatsoever, unless we have changes in the labor force, the size of the labor force, the amount of machinery that we have, the capital stock, or technology. So in the end, increasing G to create jobs is a very short-term solution, and what this would mean is towards the end, there will be no change in Y, and all we get is the price level would just increase even further. As an exercise, try a drop in aggregate demand due to, say, a drop in GDP because of the drop in G, or drop in exports, or a rise in tax rates. Try this out on a piece of paper and go from short-run initial changes and convince yourself, how do we go back to the long-run equilibrium?